Hey everybody, welcome back to Ogre Speed Shop. So we're gonna get back on the rear end of the truck and finish up the brakes and get the hubs installed. But first we gotta install some Speedi sleeves over there. I'll show you how we're gonna do that. So let's get into it. All right, so you may be asking yourself, what is a Speedi sleeve? For those of you who don't know, it's this right here. It's a very thin sleeve that has an install tool. See a little cup looking thing? And what that does, it's a repair for surfaces that get galled up by seals. So this is something you can put on to repair a seal surface, which is what we need to do, because this side was obviously leaking because it was filled with oil. So I bought two of them to do both sides. That way it won't be an issue in the future. So, but here's the thing. This has to go over the axle tube, which isn't a problem just for the sleeve itself. It can go over no problem and start on there, like so. But the install tool doesn't have an opening for to go over the axle. But we're gonna fix that, don't worry. I'll show you how we're gonna do that and get around that problem. Okay, I don't like that. I'm gonna move that tape before I take that off. Those things are expensive. These two Speedi sleeves were 50 bucks each. Cost me $111 out the door after taxes. So yeah, you definitely don't want to mess them up, because you mess them up, that's 50 bucks out the door and out your pocket. So let me get this tape off here so I can get it off there. But if you look at it, you see how nice and real thin it is. So all that does is fix the seal surface, so you get a nice seal and no more leaks. So, but we got to modify this reinstall tool using a piece of tube steel and my punch tool. I'll show you why we got to use a punch tool. It's kind of obvious. We got to put a hole in the back of this install tool so we can get it over the axle. So like I said, we need to modify this install tool. So we want to find the center line of it. All right, so we need to find the center line of 2.462. All right, so we're gonna do the old fashioned way. 2.462, so that's 1.231. So 1.231. Gonna mark the line that way. Okay, so I got it marked now. So we go ahead and center punch it. I'm trying to keep this surface here not putting pressure on it. So I'm gonna try to keep it up above the ground, or above the table, so I don't damage that surface. Okay, so that's a 1/2 inch hole. And I think that'll work for that one. Yep. So I'm gonna start off my small punch, because that gives me the exact size for this punch here to fit the hole through there. Not the exact size, but gets it closer to that size. So we're gonna go ahead and punch it out with this one first. Okay, so we get the tool set up. We gotta screw this into here. There's a spacer goes on there. Then one of the dies, and then the portion that cuts the tool, or it cuts it. That screws on there like that. We just hook the hose to it. Okay, we tighten the little knob, just pump it up and let it cut right through. Release it. So we have that hole. Now we can bump up to the next size. That's what the cutout looks like when it's done. I don't know if that'll fit over that. Let's go check the axle and see. Okay, that's too small, so we need to go to this next size here. We go test fit this one. So that size definitely feels like it'll work. So let's go ahead and remove this shaft. We gotta put the bigger shaft in. Same thing on the spacer and the cutter. That fits down over top of that, perfect. Screw that down in, tighten your knob, and crank away. Voila, so we got a perfect hole in there. Let's go see if it fits the axle tube now. So all it needs to do is be able to fit over that. Oh, not quite. It's this next ledge here, so close. It's okay. I got a die grinder. I can make it a little bit bigger. All right, just a short time with a die grinder and a little sanding wheel, and she fits up on there now. So now we can install the Speedi Sleeve. But first we need to cut that tube down to make it a little bit shorter so it's a little easier to work with to install this thing. What I'm talking about is that tube right there. We're going to use the actually hammer on this to install that sleeve. All right, so when installing these Speedi Sleeves, one of the things you want to do is make sure you have a nice surface for it to go onto, because you want to fix it. You don't want it to get torn up again. So just take some sandpaper, just kind of clean up the edges, so that way when you put the Speedi Sleeve on, you're not going to tear it up when it goes on over this edge right here. So just make sure that edge is cleaned up a little bit. Get the Speedi Sleeve and get her installed. Let's go ahead with a little brake clean and wipe her down. So you just want to make sure you get it nice and square on there before you start hitting it with a hammer. This is a tool I made, just a little tube here. Slide it over there, make sure you're nice and square. Start tapping her on. And there you have it. Nice clean surface for the new seal. This was the smallest size I could find as far as width goes. So because the bearing actually sits up against that ledge that's up underneath there, we have to do some trimming on the outside of this thing just to clean it up. And that way we get that surface back. I probably just use a flat disc or something to do that. But that's all there is to it to install that thing. So now we got a nice good seal surface on there. All right, so now that's on there. Let's just check it with the, put the seal on there, make sure it fits over it. Just be careful not to tear your seal while you're testing it. A little bit of grease could be used too. All right, fits on there. There's a bearing. And it butts up against the shelf there, so we are good to go to put this one back on. I'm waiting on wheel studs though. Once they get here, we'll put those in and then we can reassemble our hubs. Now, when installing your bearings for this, the bearings get lubricated by the differential fluid. So a little bit of grease just to get it started is fine, but you don't need to pack these like you do regular bearing on like the front wheel hubs. So, but yeah, now we're gonna assemble the hubs and get those ready to go on. But like I said, we're gonna wait to get the wheel studs so we can install those prior to going on the car, the truck. So, just gotta do the other side now. All right, so I got this side installed and trimmed down now too. Looking really nice. So both sides are done. Just gotta wait on the wheel studs and we can get the drums put on. And the wheel hubs too, forgot about that. So they're over here. Let me show you those real quick. So the Dana 60 is a full floater. So once these are on there, I could put a wheel on it, roll it around. I just wouldn't have drive axles, which are over there on the shelf. See how they bolt in? But even without the axles in there, this thing can be rolled around because all the weight is on the bearings on the outside of this. So there's the inner bearing, the big one, and an outer bearing, the smaller one. And they're held in with these nuts, these big nuts. So we'll get to that when we get this wheel. So I started assembling the hubs. I got the bearing, the inner bearing in, and the seals on. The reason I didn't record is because I think about it the first time and then I had an issue, and I'll show you what that issue was. All right, when you're installing these seals, you want to make sure you grease the inside of them, because inside this, these seals have these little metal springs that keep the form of that seal in there. And if you start tapping that in, those things will pop right out of there. And when they pop right out of there and the seal's already in there, it's a pain in the butt to get it back on there, because even like that, it can be a pain. So I sat here for about half an hour with a couple picks trying to get that thing to loop back in. So just make sure you put some grease. Just kind of fill this area with grease to prevent that from popping out on you when you're installing them. But anyways, I got that one put together, and I was kind of bored, so I decided to start putting things together, and I just smacked my head on my hose. So that's what it's going to look like when it's all together. As you can see, it doesn't have studs in it because those won't be here till either Tuesday or Wednesday, and today's Monday. So, got new studs coming, but that's all, the hub's all assembled, and I got the drum on there just for the aesthetic and to be able to see what it looks like. Axle's not in it yet, you can see it's open in the end, but yeah, that's where we're at right now. I just wanted to play around a little bit today, and like I said, this kind of got me down a little bit because when that thing popped out of there and I had to get it back in there, it was a pain. So I want to make sure, I don't know what I was making sure of, but yeah, I just want to make sure everybody knows to make sure if you're putting these things in, just slather some grease in there to hold that spring in place. Otherwise it'll pop out on you and you'll be spending half a day trying to get that thing back in there. All right, UPS just stopped by and brought me a package. So let's open her up and see what we got. So what did we get? So we got some wheel studs. Make sure they're the right ones. Oh yeah, exact ones, perfect. These are bearings. I love the boxes are nice and sealed. Look at that shit. But those are either crank or rod bushings, or what the hell are they called? Bearing. But that's going to be for a future for putting the motor back together. We got the wheel studs there. Should be 16 of them. Actually, there's 20 of them. 2 boxes of 10 each, and then 1 box of 25 lug nuts. So we should be covered for putting the new wheel studs in. I'm going to show you 2 different methods of installing these wheel studs. And the first one's going to be probably the better of the 2. That's going to be using the press to press them in, because that way it doesn't put any strain on the threads. And the other method, we're going to do it, since that hub's on there, we're going to do it on the hub, another method that way to show you how that goes. And I have a special tool just for that. All right, for this first method, we're just going to use the press. And you just use a socket to stick it down over top there. It's a little bit taller than what what is needed. And that's going to bring, because it'll bring it up flat like that. So we just need to bring something, let's see. That's why we have these little adapter deals. Noticed a bunch of oil on my press earlier, so I wonder if it's something going on with it. I don't know if you saw how that leveled out there. You just stick it in there and press it through now. You just press it in until it stops. Give it a little extra there. And you're good to go. So that's a real quick, easy way of putting new studs in. I just got to do 7 more. There you have it, all new studs. Looking good. All right, so the next method we're going to use is using the Lyle 22800 wheel stud installer tool. The way this works, if you look, it's got a nice little bearing in there. So as you crank it on, and see how it's got a concave port basically for your lug nut to go in there. So you stick this on here, stick your stud in there. This makes it real nice for installing them on the vehicle. And you stick that piece on there like that, and you get your lug nut, which I gotta grab one real quick. Let me grab that. So I'm gonna use one of the old lug nuts, and I'm just gonna make sure I grease the threads on the shank itself. That way it won't gall it. So like I said, see how it's concave, how that lug nut fits right down inside there? And it helps to have the tool. You're being loud again, dude. So this is a 13 seconds, 13 sixteenths lug nut for these. All you do is crank it in. Probably gonna have to find some way of stopping this wheel from moving, or this hub from spinning. That's all you gotta do. Let me find some way of stopping this. Take it on there and hold her in place. Oh God. All right. Definitely easier if you have some way of stopping the hub from spinning. But you don't have to hold both sides with. Let's try with an impact. See if the Ryobi's strong enough. Sure isn't. Get the air. All right, watch your ears. All right, so it's pretty clear that the Lyle tool does not work on the bigger studs, at least not pressing into this one. So we're gonna go ahead and pull the hub off. Which sucks. But, so yeah, and it actually galled the threads on that, trying to get that in there. So I'm gonna pull the axle off. I guess it's a little bigger than that. So we get to see how the axles come out at least. So you just loosen these bolts up. They're not tight. I haven't tightened them down yet, but they're tight enough to where I can't just take them off by hand. Pull the axle out. All right, so we gotta bend this tab back. So there's a little retainer down inside here. It has these bent tabs. I already bent one of them over. Only did the one. We got a big socket for that too. So just to give you an idea that these are not like torqued down as hard as you can. Look at the little wrench I'm gonna use to remove it. Got a little caught up on the tab that I had bent over, but there's that one. And there's the tab. Shoot, a smaller screwdriver. There's your retainer. As you see how smooth that is. And it didn't take anything to remove that nut. And there's your nut. There is a bearing in there. So we're gonna pull this off and set the bearing aside. Now on these bearings, I said earlier, you don't have to worry about packing them, but just put a little bit of grease on there to stop the little friction when you're first putting them in. All right, so we're gonna go back to the press. We already went through that, so I'm not gonna try using that Lyle tool anymore because it galled the threads on this brand new stud. Luckily I had 4 extras. So we press that back out, do the rest of these, and we'll come back and we'll reinstall all this stuff. All right, we got those all pressed in now. And I did notice when I pulled it out, the stuff we tried to put in there, it was a little bit crooked, which is probably why it wouldn't go on. Because usually that Lyle tool works really well. Just not today, when I'm trying to just demonstrate it for everybody. So you saw I put the bearing in, so the taper is facing inward. Match up with the bearing race. Get that started. And the same thing, like I said, you don't need a whole lot of torque. Just kind of tighten it down for feel. Right about there. Nice, easy spinning. Not putting any pressure on them, just like make sure there's no play in it. Now this tab has to go, this retainer has to go on. It's keyed right here to the axle tube. And hopefully it lines up the way it did before. All right, let's see if that's good there. All right, perfect. That lined up and is on, the tab is on the one of the flats of the nut. Put the retainer nut on there. This one you can just torque down to whatever. Make sure it's tight. All right. So he's going to bend a tab over to hold it in place. Let's see if this will do it or not. Yep, there we go. So now we got a tab holding that in place. Let me bring it in so you can see that. See that tab right there? It's bent over on the flat of this nut. And there's a flat over here. It's also holding that nut in on the back side for that tab. So there's a couple of them on that actual. There's one up here too that holds it on the inside nut. But that's all there is to it. All right, so next thing we gotta do is put the axle tube back in. And it's just as simple as sliding her in there. I'll probably take this back apart again because I think I want to clean out the tubes. But for now, I want to keep the end sealed up so no extra dirt gets inside there. I don't know if you notice there's a metal seal that goes between the axle tube and the hub. I think I need new gloves. What do you think? Does it need to be replaced? Keep getting caught on everything. Like that. And there you have it. That side is all back together. Feels really smooth and nice. Okay, so the next thing we gotta do is get the drum on there. We'll grab one. I'm gonna clean out the drum a little bit since it's still got the oil from shipping on it. I'm sure most of you have seen how this is done, but you want a little bit of drag on the drum when it's installed. Oh yeah, and right here, if you see this hole right here and this hole right here, those are actually threaded holes that on the drum, there's two spots where it actually has a hold down screw. And I'll show you that once we get the shoes adjusted out to where they're dragging a little bit. Just gotta line up those holes so I know where we're at. So right about there, but that's definitely way too loose. It's not dragging at all. So we're gonna adjust our screw out. There you go, it's got a nice drag on it. And so these screws right here, see how they're like tapered? They screw into these holes here and hold the drum in place. Like broken flathead will work. I think it was made for it. It's got a nice amount of drag on it, so that's right where we want to have it. So that's it for this side. So this side is done. I'm just going to repeat all that on the other side, and the rear brakes will be done on this thing. Pretty much the rear end completely. I think I'm going to drain it at some point and put some fresh fluid in it. I looked at it the other day. It's a little low, and but it looks clean, like it's been changed. But some of the sludge in the axle tubes are pretty nasty, so we may tear it apart just to see, to clean it nicely. But as far as I'm concerned, it can run that way. It's not going to damage it. It's not like I'm going to be out there racing this thing and doing wild burnouts because it's a peg leg for one. So, all right, so go do the other side, and when I'm done with that, I'll be back. All right, so we got the brakes all assembled in the back now. I think the next thing we're gonna do is get the parking brake cables put back on. I just gotta find all the parts. I have them stored over there someplace. So I think that'll be the next phase of this, is getting all the parking brake cables run from back here and back up around. If I remember how they go, there was a bar that went this way and a hook over here someplace, and yeah. So I think that's what we'll do. We'll run the cables for the parking brake. Real quick, after I did the video on the brakes, put the drums and everything on, I went ahead and made all new brake line for the route up to the front. Because you saw me on that video we did, which I'll link down below, where we did the brake lines and all the drums and assembled everything. And then I wasn't sure if it'd be enough line left over to run a solid line the whole way up. And as you see, there is more than enough. So that runs all the way across in basically the same location. The turns, the curves are, or the bends are a little different from original, but because I couldn't quite duplicate what they had, and so I just made my own, but this is kind of the way it was. So now it's just a matter of getting the cab on there and getting the master cylinder and everything where it goes, and then routing this line here. So, but we have to get the cab back on the frame first, and that might be coming up pretty soon. I don't know yet. But that's where we're at with the brakes. So let me gather up the parts for the parking brake cables, and we'll get everything put back together. All right, so I found all the parts for the parking brake cables. So we have the main cable that comes out of the cab, and this is what hooks to the pedal. Then this piece here is what hooks to this little adjuster. And the cable that runs to the back, which is this one right here, runs through those. So it runs through this one, it runs through this. There's also these two hooks here that run along the side of the frame as well. But this here goes, I'll show you once we get it over there. But so these are all the parts, we have them all. So we're good to go as far as putting it all back together. So if you look back here, you can see we already have the main cable going into the shoes, or into the drum. And these little clips right here, they go onto the cable just like that. All right, so as far as the cable that goes back to that, it goes through these little V's over here, one on each side. And that, again, hooks into that little clip right there for that side of it. So these are definitely, you can see there's some bends in the cable. That's from the original where they were set up. I'm not sure which way it's supposed to go, but I don't think it really matters because it'll make new as it goes. So, all right, so we got those all hooked up. And there we have, see, got those attached now. One of the next parts is this big long rod. There's a hole right here with an angle through it. That goes through there. And attaches to this. And somehow leaves a cable in there. Now we gotta figure that out. I'm not sure how it goes yet. I'll be back when I figure it out. I think I figured it out. I had to disconnect the cable from one end over there. So we have this cable here. And then we can put this in like so. And then run the cable through it. We do it like that. And you just run the cable through it. And that'll hold it in place. There we go. Now we got it. It's been a couple months since I took this apart, so I'm trying to remember how it all goes together. All right, so we got that part. All right, so the next part we put on with these hooks. And they hook around the cable right here, and they just go through the frame on each side. I think that's right. Hopefully it ain't the one that's supposed to be up here. I put a mount through for the brake line, but it'll be fine there. Okay, so the next part, this cable has to go through that hole right here. And it'll clip in to the frame just like that. Now that part attaches to the cable back here via this little clip. And it goes on there just like that. And then this cable goes through that hole, and those nuts are used to tighten it down. So let's do that real quick. So now we have that attached, and that nut, or that lever, or this piece right here, the screw, goes underneath the cable to hold it in place. So now, a couple clamps. One that goes right here, and another one that goes on top of the wheel well when it's together. So, but that is the parking brake assembly now. And it may go under the cross member, but the cross member is loose, so I'll have to remember how that goes. I can't remember offhand. But that's how the parking brake goes. So that lever there, that rod right there, the cable itself, and this cable that goes back to these two clips, these two brackets, and then the two hooks. All right, so I think we're gonna call it good on this video for the finishing up the rear brakes and getting the hubs back on there with the drums and everything. So, and we got the parking brake cables in. So that's gonna do it for this one. I went ahead and moved it over and actually attached the cab. It's really nothing to see. You just line up the 4 holes and drop it down on there. So you guys can see the new cab mounts, each corner. So that might change. Those are shims, but in the pictures I found, it showed them both in there. So that's where I put them. But other than that, the thing I got left to do on the cab is that corner over there, but I just want to get it out of the way. Project coming in, I got to make room for. I'm going to do it right here in this space. All right, that's going to do it for this video. Getting the drums and hubs and everything back on the truck, getting the parking brake ran, and got the cab on there now. So if you like this video, leave a like down there, leave me a comment, let me know what I can do better. And if you want to, go ahead and subscribe. I appreciate you all being here this long. And so until next time, I will see y'all later.